Arkansas cable providers are connecting our state to the world. Through our state-of-the-art broadband networks, educators, healthcare providers, emergency responders, law enforcement personnel, and consumers have access to the information superhighway like never before, many times at greatly reduced costs. That's our commitment to making Arkansas a leader in the digital age. Arkansas cable providers are indeed connecting our state to the world, and we're just getting started.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. I'm David Goins.
I'm Roby Brock. We are joined now with our political long table. We have Senator David Sanders from Little Rock, Republican from Little Rock's House of Representatives, David Meeks from Conway, Republican as well. Thank you very much for being with us this morning, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, as we head into February here, obviously the session is coming up on February 10th. No secret, obviously, healthcare, private option has been a slight discussion point. We've heard a little bit about that. What have we heard? We've heard everyone's made up their mind. So what happens February 10th from your perspective? We'll start with you, Senator Sanders.
Well, I don't know that everyone has made up their mind. In fact, there's a significant amount of time, and you know, the sort of the compression of time and all the artfulness of a fiscal session, which I guess this will be our third. I think there's still a lot to be worked out. But obviously, you know, it is healthcare, the private option, which was Arkansas's alternative to following sort of the Obamacare Medicaid expansion rollout that was set forth in the Affordable Care Act, is the preeminent issue. And I think what is different, where we find ourselves today, rather if we were sort of flip back and go back to April of last year, is, you know, what was conceptual, what was a estimate, what was an actuarial report, a concept that, you know, that we had come up with, is operational now. And that operational in terms of people getting private insurance, who folks in other states in this population are getting Medicaid and some aren't getting anything at all. That's happening, but you also see states like Iowa, Republican Governor Terry Branstad, the Republican governor of Pennsylvania, and now Utah, which may be the most Republican state in the union, emulating this policy. So I think ultimately we'll rise and fall on the policy. And, you know, we're just into phase one. We have phase two elements that we're working on right now.
Do either of you, Representative Meeks or Senator Sanders, do you see proof that it is working as you envisioned it to work?
Or maybe proof that's not working, Representative Meeks?
Well, you know, I think that's the whole point is, and as you said, it's going to have a hard time, I think, passing as is in the session, just because there are so many things that, you know, we've seen crop up. And one of the big things was the reimbursement with the doctors. You know, one of the things that we were told is it was going to work just like private insurance. And then for the Blue Cross and Blue Shield to come back and say we're going to pay specialists 15% less for those that are on the private option, I think that's one of the speed bumps that you've seen hit. We've also now see that as of right now, you know, there's no premium for those that are on a private option. There's no co-pays, no deductibles whatsoever. And that also is an issue as well. And again, I know that some of that stuff could change if we get into the second phase, but those are just a couple of the issues right now that we're seeing with the private option.
I mean, you voted against it last year, but has anything really been different from what you thought it would be last spring?
Well,
a little bit. Exactly what you thought, and that's why you're still.
You know, I think there's been a little bit that has changed. Again, there are some things in the private option that I see that I do like, you know, and there are some things that I see that I don't like. I've spoken with Senator Sanders and others, and in concept, it's a good thing. You know, getting people off a broken Medicaid system, getting them onto a private insurance. The issues, you know, the big issue is the number of people that we're going to put on it. You know, is it sustainable in the long term? And I think that as it is right now, it's not. Yeah, right now the federal government, which happens to be $17 trillion in debt, is picking up the cost of it, adding more to our federal debt. But in a few years, Arkansas is going to have to start picking up the cost. And I think that's where you start running into the issues. Is it sustainable long term?
as it is right now, I don't think that it is.
Senator Sanders, speak to the points that he's
Yeah,
making, and also tell me what tweaks need to be made, do you think, to convince some legislators who are either on the fence or who are persuadable to come over and agree with your position?
Well, a couple things. If people are watching who actually are on the private option today, if you fall within the category of 100 to 138% of federal poverty, you actually do have copays. That's required, and that was part of the law. You know, part of it is you want to phase it in. So what we're working on right now is, I say, the heart and soul of the private option. And look, just because someone's on health insurance doesn't mean that's not I guess a formula for success long term. What is going to be a formula of success, not only for the private option, but for our teachers' insurance and our state employees' insurance, but you and everybody in the studio, is that we stop being users of healthcare and become consumers of healthcare. So what we're working on right now is a very significant component of this, which is the development of the health savings account for this population. And what originally, when we started, was going to be a pilot is much bigger and much more impactful. And you've seen states like Indiana, South Carolina, other states that have used health savings accounts for this population and have done it with great success. So we know that that's a key element. That's being developed now. We've hired former Republican governor of Utah, former Bush administration HHS secretary, Health and Human Services Secretary, Governor Leavitt, to write those amendments to the waiver. And that is, I think that's some of the things that David and I really agree on.
Should there be means testing?
I think, well, I mean, in terms of means testing, you're testing income, and I think what we want to do is not only check income, at the point of enrollment, but throughout the process. Because the idea is, as people earn more and move up the income scale, they should be able to pay more.
Right.
So you're developing cost sharing for people at 50 to 100%, and then we're talking about actually taking existing Medicaid fee-for-service populations and moving them to the private option. I'm going to say this about insurance and healthcare, and specifically about the specialists that on 15% cut. Maybe
Can I get you to hold the thought for you?
Fair enough, because it's a good point.
Absolutely, and we're going to have a whole lot more with Senator David Sanders and Representative David Meeks when we come back. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock. You have the Capitol View on Sunday morning on KARK.
Farm Bureau helps protect its members in more ways than you might think. They've always been the voice of agriculture in Arkansas, working on behalf of folks like me when nobody else would. And Farm Bureau stands for the values that Arkansas families care about. They've protected my right to farm and make a living, which helps everybody who likes food on the table. You know what they say, Arkansas counts on agriculture, and agriculture counts on Farm Bureau.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock alongside David Goins. We're joined by our political long table here, Representative David Meeks, Republican from Conway, State Senator David Sanders, Republican from Little Rock. Gentlemen, I want to kind of get a little bit of perspective. You were about to make a point before we went to the commercial break. I'll let you finish your thought there, sure. David. Go ahead.
Well, it's an important thing because Representative Meeks brought it up, and it's certainly an issue. And that is Blue Cross Blue Shield made the decision to reimburse specialists 15% less commercial rates, their commercial rate. Now, and remember, go back a year ago, everybody in the healthcare community was saying we want Medicaid expansion, which we all know reimburses at a lower level. I'm fearful of, and I don't think it'll work if you start to see political influence and lawmakers getting in the middle of sort of private or what is a private entity's negotiation with their contractors. We don't want that. That's sort of the pathway to single payer, which is not what I want at all. I want the private market to work. But what ultimately will take care of that is putting together a market that is Arkansas that looks competitive, so that there will be other competitors and carriers come into the state and compete for that business. So I think that's important. I don't want to go there.
Well, and I would say, on that one, yeah, we don't want the government to start interfering, but you got to remember these are taxpayers' dollars that was being used. One of the things that was set in the private option is that, hey, they are going to be reimbursed at private insurance rates. So for them to kind of make that assumption and say that.
They determine what their rates are.
I understand.
Not us. We don't want to go there.
What changes would be possible from your perspective to the private option and still kind of keep it afloat?
Yeah, there are some things that are certainly being talked about. Some of the House members have talked about that. One thing that we think is significant is because of Iowa's experience and that the fact that they're following our lead, they actually got approval to waive non-emergency transportation now, and that was one of the things. In fact, it's like the one WRAP benefit. That's a benefit not provided in insurance, but provided by Medicaid that we were told you may have to keep. And we have it now. So what I think.
And that essentially Medicaid pays for people going to the hospital.
Yeah. So
when
if you don't, and it works this way: if you don't have access to to transportation, they will pay for it. Well, what we're going to seek, and this is just one thing, and I think this would be something that Representative Meeks is supportive of, is to get that waived, get the same thing that Iowa did. Because now you see other states emulating us, they're gonna improve upon it. They're gonna tweak on it. And the fact is, we have to come back every single year and re-up in a regular session or fiscal session. We want to make use of the innovations that other states develop, following our lead. So I think we've got that sort of built-in innovation into the plan. And the thing is, I think where we are today, we've done enough. And in terms of the estimates that were projected, in terms of even the average rate, we were told that the average rate may be just south of $10,000. Well, it's not. It's $4,700 an annual rate. I think it deserves another year at least.
Representative Meeks, could you be persuaded to change your vote to vote for the private option?
I think it's going to be a tough. We are limited in the fiscal session. I think some of the changes that I would like to see in it would take. Actual legislative. One of the things that's been brought up lately by Representative Bruce Westerman is the fact that the people in the private option are given a silver plan, and we've asked our teachers lately to help save or to help shore up their insurance plan, that, hey, you need to go down to the bronze plan in order to make it more sustainable. Of course, that would take a change in the legislation, because the legislation at this point is silver plan. But there are some other things too. We need to. I think we need to limit it, because again, as it stands right now, I think it's too broad. It's going to cost too much. When Arkansas has to start picking up some of the tab, it's just not going to be possible to be sustainable to the Arkansas taxpayer in the long run.
How much time is spent on making changes, tweaks to private options to try to keep it afloat, or do you jump over to Plan B? It ain't working. We need to find another way.
Listen, so here's a point. I'll make it right now. Bronze level plan and the teacher plan is actually, is an HSA. What we're talking right now is working on developing the HSA for this population. That's significant, because he identified an area where he could get, and maybe even Bruce Westerman could get. So I think that's going to be critical, and hopefully we'll have some news on that.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up right there, guys. State Representative David Meeks, State Senator David Sanders, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock. You are watching Capitol View on Sunday morning. We'll be right back to wrap it up.
Arkansas's most abundant natural resource provides the core asset for Deltic Timber Corporation. In addition to the sustainable yield stewardship of its well-stocked timberlands, Deltic adds value by integrating its efficient wood products manufacturing facilities, as well as through planned development of commercial and residential real estate. Deltic Timber Corporation, creating value for a growing Arkansas.
Okay, welcome into the KRK Capitol View App Extra. Rejoin Roby Brock. We have our panel here, Senator David Sanders and Representative David Meeks. Sanders has the Capitol View smartphone app. I hear Meeks doesn't.
I will be getting it very soon.
That better change soon.
It will.
Roby.
I had a quick question for both of you guys. We talked a lot about policy, heavy on policy. I want to talk politics here. We saw just this past week where State Senator Missy Irvin, State Representative John Hutchinson may both get primary opponents in the Republican primary as a result of their previous votes on the private option. Is there a fear out there among GOP legislators that they're going to get primaried, and does that play into their decision making on the private option?
Well, that's one of those questions. I think it's up to each individual legislator. Most of the ones that I know of in the Republican Party, they're worried about doing the right thing for their district and the right thing for their constituents. Does getting a primary, it probably does weigh on their mind. So we'll just kind of see how all that plays out as we go along.
Senator Sanders?
Well, I'm up for re-election this year,
yeah.
And in fact, the way you deal with that is you go try to insulate yourself best you can by going out and representing your district and campaigning effectively in your district and talking to folks. But I think Representative Meeks is right. The politics, man, if you let politics take this thing over, then it'll never happen. And I think when you weigh the policy and the implications, I mean, remember, this thing was conceived originally as a way to put a backstop against all the negative things that are in the Affordable Care Act, which neither one of us like. And so if you're removing that backstop, you're exposing your state to some bad things in terms of the cuts, in terms of the taxes, in terms of how it's really going to affect the delivery of health care in our state.
And long term, you guys, because I've talked to a bunch of you privately about this, not just here in this room, but other legislative leaders too. I mean, this is about changing the whole entitlement program in the long run, the reform of entitlements as they have grown over the last several decades.
Yeah,
so you're willing to throw all that away to not have that opportunity to reform?
Well, I mean, so the cat's out of the bag. Iowa is emulating us. Pennsylvania is attempting to emulate us. And Utah, again, the most conservative Republican state in the union, they're emulating us. But here's the point. A lot of states cover people way up the income scale, well, higher up the income scale than we do. So a lot of states do. So if we're right, which I suspect that we are, that we can do it cheaper, budget neutrality is a requirement of this. If we're 1% right, 2% right, 3% right, then what we have effectively done is given the country a new model for administering services, one based in private insurance, and you're putting those people who historically have been segregated from the broader insurance pool, and here we have we have the youngest pool in the country, and that will have an impact. So there are some dynamic things at work here in terms of impacting the delivery of health care for a population that's traditionally gotten it through just a standard entitlement program. But you're also talking about the market effect of introducing people to participate in the insurance pool that, quite frankly, have been segregated from it. So that is significant and shouldn't be lost in this conversation.
Representative Meeks, one thing you mentioned last year during the private option debate was, I don't want to vote for something and in 3 years when the feds start peeling off, maybe we get rid of it. And that was essentially one of the reasons you didn't vote for it. But what about this idea of not voting for it just 1 year after you guys pass it? I mean, does that seem, for those who are potentially switching votes, does that seem like a fair proposition to do that before 3 years? I mean, that's something the governor mentioned this week, because kind of the terms was, we thought we'd at least do this for 3 years.
Right, and I think the issue with that is, if we feel that's bad, if we feel it's not sustainable, and we don't think that we can actually get to that point, why do we want to keep on doing it? Because then you just exacerbate the problem. You potentially, instead of only having 85 or 100,000 people that you're going to have to take this away from, that number may be 200, 250,000, which makes it much more difficult. And that's where we've had problems in the past with government programs. They started out small, or they started out in a certain way, and they continue to grow, continue to grow, continue to grow, and it makes it very difficult for us to have to cut benefits, raise taxes, or cut other areas of the budget in order to actually meet the budget, and that is the fear. So for a lot of folks that just say, look, this is not going to work, it makes it easier for them to do it after 1 year. Again, there is a good concept of doing it. There's a lot of us that are looking at, okay, how can we limit it? Maybe do something within the next year so that we can get into the legislative session and make the tweaks that we think that we need to make in order to make it sustainable in the long term. And I think that's where you're going to see the battle, so to speak, play out.
This guy's walking around with a truckload of lumber building bridges here. I mean, listen, I mean, seriously, I mean, there's something to be said for the tone of his comments. Because, I mean, what he could be saying is absolutely not, no way, no how, never. But, I mean, he's talking in terms of, how do we make it work? Look, we knew that we would have to go back to the federal government. The Roberts decision effectively elevated the states in their negotiations with the Fed. Yeah. The fact that we've got a physical session means that we have to re-up this thing every single year. So, we're in a good spot here, potentially. I would say this, if the rates had come back and had been, at the early estimates in that, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 range, that would have been grounds to probably stop this thing. Had they not agreed to, letting us move forward on the HSAs, the consumerism, or said no to the cost sharing for the below 100, or they said no, you're not going to be able to transition populations. Yes, that's where you cut, but they haven't. So I think where we are now, to your point, I think it deserves a chance, maybe to his point even, deserves a chance maybe just to get us into the next regular session. We will have a new governor.
Gentlemen, we're going to stop you right there, but I appreciate it very much. David Sanders, David Meeks, That was like an app extra.
It's like, I almost heard, I still believe in a place called Hope. I almost heard that from you.
No,
Almost.
yeah, I did not go there.
There we go. All right, well, there's the app extra for this week. We'll see you back here next Sunday. We'll be right in the middle of the Olympics at that point. So you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.